for so long still endure? Do I really care? Hey, hey, let's talk about the distractions going on elsewhere. I keep hearing footsteps, baby, in the dark. Oh, in the dark. Why? I keep hearing footsteps, baby, in the dark. Oh, in the dark. Woo.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It is your host, Emmanuel I. Smith, and this is part 3 of MK Ultra Part 5, Experiential Narratives. We are going to finish up the lecture presently. I am in Miami-Dade County, Florida. The time is 4:09 p.m. and the date is Saturday, April 18th, 2026. Thank you for being here today, ladies and gentlemen. We will proceed with a continuation of where we last left off. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, it is not easily foreseeable if a lecture can be completed by me, your host, in one sitting. Sometimes the more comprehensive ones need 2 or 3 in order to complete the picture being presented, given the depth of the material being read. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with the radio TV reports document. The show or program is called Jack Anderson Confidential. The host of this program is Jack Anderson. The date of this program is February 12th, 1983. And it is broadcast on WJLA TV. And we left off with Mr. Anderson's conversation with Dr. Lawrence Bryan. This document is a transcript of interviews done on this program with actual victims of MK Ultra. There were a number of MK Ultra experiments that were conducted in an Atlanta, Georgia prison. And there were horrible psychological effects on the subjects of this experiment, because this experiment involved the use of chemical and biological agents on these prisoners, and these prisoners suffered horrible physiological effects from the use of these chemical and biological agents on them while incarcerated. And some of these biological agents included the use of LSD, which is a hallucinogenic drug. And these prisoners, there were 4 of them, but not all 4 of them were interviewed here. Let's see. I'm sorry, 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so two of the prisoners and an attorney representing them are being interviewed here. So we have already seen the effects of this program on Russell Kirk. He was nearly driven to suicide by this experiment that was done on him by the CIA, using the prison hospital as a proxy to administer these experiments. So Russell Kirk was nearly driven to suicide because of this experiment. And James Knight said that the experiments that were done on him made him violent and irritable. So Kirk and Knight were both experimented on by the CIA in this Atlanta prison. And the physiological effects of these experiments on these men has caused them permanent psychological damage, and they're suing the federal government. So the next interviewee is Dr. Lawrence Bryan. He is one of the doctors that administered the drugs to these inmates, namely those drugs and biological agents that cause the inmates to suffer physiological effects that were crippling to them in the grand scheme of things with respect to their ability to reassimilate into society in any capacity. Those CIA experiments done on those men mangled their body and minds. And it brings to light a fundamental question as to the nature of human experiments, and that's who do you experiment on and why? If human subjects are needed for an experiment, is it lawful, legal, ethical, and effective to experiment on prisoners? Is it effective to experiment on people who may have mental disorders? Is it effective to experiment on people who suffer from physiological diseases and can't quite contribute to society anyhow? Is it effective to choose people? Okay, we're talking about the federal government of the United States here. Is it effective? And is it efficient to choose people for human experiments that are in some way considered socially unacceptable or defective? Is that the best way to go about this? Okay, I think this lawsuit proves that it isn't. Okay, the CIA chose prisons as a preferred experimentation facility because it's filled with people who are seen as deleterious to society. So if you're going to do human experiments, you might as well do them on people who are deleterious to society, right? People who have committed some act against society or some infraction against society and are currently paying their debt to society. Why not use these experiments on them? They don't have anything to lose. It's not like they're employed. It's not like they have a family. It's not like they're taxpayers or voters. They're just people here in the United States. They're taking up space. Let's experiment on these prisoners with biochemical agents, biological agents, and hallucinogenic drugs so that we can analyze the data that is produced from these experiments and make society better for normal people. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm of the mindset that that is a bit gung-ho with respect to the sociological or socio-political reasoning. Okay? In my estimation, if you get people who have committed horrible infractions against children, if you get people who are convicted of brutalizing elderly people, if you get people who are on death row for committing any number of heinous crimes against their fellow man, you could experiment on them. Why is the CIA targeting people like Dr. Frank Olson for experiments? Okay, an Army biologist and researcher who was a husband and a father of 3. The CIA authorized an experiment on Dr. Frank Olson, who was considered an asset to American society. And Dr. Sidney Godaleb, who was the chief experimenter on the MK Ultra project, spiked Dr. Frank Olson's drink, his bottle of liquor, with LSD, and caused Dr. Olson permanent brain damage and permanent mental damage. And over the next 7 days, Dr. Olson's mental health deteriorated to the point where he eventually jumped off the 10-story building. He jumped out of a 10th-story window out of the Statler Hotel in New York City while seeking treatment for his psychological ailments. Dr. Olson wasn't told you're getting ready to ingest some LSD. Dr. Sidney Godaleb did not give him the courtesy of letting him know that he was about to be experimented on. He just simply spiked his drink. And when Dr. Olson ingested it, that was essentially the end of his life. And he never recovered. Okay? So it's not like the CIA in these days were saying, well, let's get the worst of society and experiment on them. The CIA in those days were saying, we'll experiment on anybody, even well-respected doctors. We don't care if he has a family or not. We don't care if he's respected in his field or not. We don't care what he does for a living. We're going to spike that man's drink and see what happens. And we're going to document the data as an experimental procedure. If he passes away, we'll write his wife a nice check for her problems and for her troubles, and so she can continue to take care of the family in Dr. Frank Olson's absence. And that's exactly what happened. But see here, ladies and gentlemen, we're seeing where prisoners are being experimented on. That didn't work out either. Now these prisoners are doing a television interview with Jack Anderson, the host of Jack Anderson Confidential. It's a nationally broadcast program. And they're saying, hey, the CIA experimented on us too. Okay, we're not Dr. Frank Olson. We're just a couple of prisoners. But you know what? The CIA experimented on us too, and nearly destroyed our life the way they did Dr. Olson's. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into the interview of Dr. Lawrence Bryan. The host, J.L. Anderson, says to Dr. Bryan, in this interview. He says, "Do you believe, as a psychologist and as a person who was there at the time when these experiments were conducted, that their claim is justified, that of damages for physical and mental health done to them as a result of these experiments?" And Dr. Lawrence Bryan, who is a psychologist, replies, excuse me one second, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so let me backtrack a little bit, okay? So Dr. Lawrence Bryan was a psychologist that worked in the Atlanta prison when this happened. Okay, these events happened about 4 years prior to the broadcasting of this interview. So Dr. Lawrence Bryan was a in-house psychologist that was present in the Atlanta prison during these experiments. And Dr. Lawrence Bryan is saying, "I cannot see that there was any harm that they sustained," which is a bald-faced lie, ladies and gentlemen. He's protecting the prison by saying that these prisoners were not harmed by being given these chemicals and these drugs without their knowledge. He's saying that they certainly did not tell me about any harm, either during the project or any time after. Anderson replies, "This story may have never become known but for the efforts of John Marks. He's an intelligence expert and an author of a definitive book on the CIA's attempts to control human behavior. Mark spoke to us about the CIA's reasons for the MK Ultra project." So we've moved from Dr. Lawrence Bryan to Dr. Lawrence Bryan to an intelligence expert named John Marks. Now, this is significant, ladies and gentlemen, because that was the extent of the remarks that Dr. Lawrence Bryan had on this topic. He simply said, "I can't fathom what damage these experiments could have possibly done to these prisoners," and that was the end. Obviously, in an attempt to protect the prison and the CIA, he was probably paid by the CIA to say that these experiments did not harm these prisoners, which they obviously did. So now we're talking to John Marks, who is an intelligence expert who has written extensively and done extensive research on the CIA's tendency to attempt to control human behavior. And John Marks is saying there is an age-old dream in the intelligence business about making people do things against their will, to give you information, to perform acts that they don't want to perform. And the CIA secretly was looking for a pill or a ray or some technique, a panacea, if you will, which would allow them to manipulate people against their will. What the CIA was doing in Atlanta was trying out LSD on people, on a captive population. But mainly the CIA was looking for the effect that it would have on certain personality types. Okay? And J.L. Anderson replies, "Is there a punishment that can be meted to them? Should there be?" Marks replies, "Well, there's a standard of medical testing which the U.S. government established at Nuremberg in 1945 because there had been Nazi experimentation on prisoners in concentration camps during the war. And that standard was very basic. It said that you could not do medical experiments on people against their will. They had to give their consent and they had to understand what they were consenting to. And we as a country executed Nazi doctors who had violated that standard. 3 or 4 years later, by 1950, our own government was doing these same kinds of experiments on unwitting subjects. Host Anderson replies, how many men had their lives ruined by the CIA secret tests? We may never know. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, a pre-trial hearing will be held in Atlanta to determine whether the case can go to trial court. The CIA's defense that the statute of limitations has run out. In other words, our government is trying to evade responsibility through legal technicalities. So what we see here, ladies and gentlemen, is an interesting exchange between John Marks and the host Jack Anderson. So Jack Anderson is basically saying that John Marks is an intelligence expert. It doesn't say what his background in intelligence is, but he probably worked for the intelligence community here in the United States at one time in some capacity. But now he writes books exposing secret experiments that are being conducted on United States citizens by the CIA. And essentially what he's saying is that the CIA has this obsession with finding techniques for forcing people to do and say things against their will. Okay? And essentially, the CIA is constantly on a search for some protocol or some chemical or some pill or some magic substance that will cause people to do things against their will, to say things against their will, to give out information that they normally wouldn't give out, and to completely abandon their personal inhibitions. All right, if you look at drugs like PCP, for example, PCP is one of those types of drugs where it causes a person to act in a way that they normally wouldn't, but it also causes people to act in a way that is totally and completely uninhibited. I mean, if you see a person take off all their clothing and walk down the street buck naked in public, they're probably on PCP. All right, if you see a guy rob a liquor store full of people, he's probably on PCP. If you see a guy go into a public park and start harassing kids, he's probably on PCP. PCP makes you do things like that. Okay, the drug PCP causes you to totally abandon your inhibitions and do or say anything, anytime, anywhere. PCP is that kind of a drug. And ultimately, the CIA is constantly looking for drugs like PCP or substances like PCP or various other chemicals that resemble PCP that cause a person to act in a way that is totally uninhibited and against their will. And the CIA is constantly looking for human test subjects to use these chemicals on to see if it works or not. Now, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear me make the comparison to gang stalking, because that's all gang stalking is. I mean, it's a bunch of hidden, federally authorized experiments on human beings who are essentially, in the CIA's mind, in the US federal government's mind, expendable, dead to rights, and have absolutely no say in the matter when these experimenters, namely the liaisons, undercover operatives, and gang stalkers, approach or otherwise interact with the targeted person using a signaling mechanism that's already been exposed by me, your host, and then they scurry off into the sunset like a bunch of sissified cowards. And they have completed their goals. And that's what I call gang stalkers, ladies and gentlemen. I call them sissified pansies. I call them sissified cowards. And I call them sissified useful idiots. And they are useful idiots, and they are sissies. And the reason I call gang stalkers sissies and pansies is because they are constantly looking for problems to cause other U.S. citizens who otherwise would not acknowledge their very existence. And they know that they're able to get away with this garbage because they know that there are other people practicing this same thing with them. There are other signalers out there. There are other gang stalking pansies out there. There are other undercover operative pansies out there. There are other liaison pansies out there. There are other covert and hidden actors that I refer to as sissies and pansies out there, constantly signaling one another, looking for damage to cause to citizens who are just minding their own business. And then they scurry off into the sunset or scurry off into the night like some sissified pansies. That's why I call them that, ladies and gentlemen. And if there's anyone who is deserving of the title of sissified pansy, it's gang stalkers, undercover operatives, and government liaisons that assist undercovers and stalkers in their goal, in their mission, in their life's work of using covert signaling mechanisms to pester, harass, and spread germs through the air to other U.S. citizens at the behest of other sissified pansies of the same type who enjoy meddling in the lives of other people with no recourse. So I don't care who you are, and I've said this in previous discourses, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care if you work for the government. I don't care if your undercover work is military in nature. I don't care if your military work is legal in nature. I don't care if your undercover work is law enforcement in nature. I don't care if your undercover work is corporate in nature. If you're a private investigator, I don't care what you are. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're a soldier. I don't care if you work in law enforcement. I don't care what you do. If you participate in a signaling mechanism in which you go around looking for signals by which to pester other U.S. citizens who otherwise would not acknowledge your very existence, you're a gang stalker, you're a punk, and you're a sissy. And I hope all the gang stalkers listening to this are offended. I hope all the undercover operatives listening to this are offended. I hope all the criminal liaisons that are listening to this, I hope you all get offended. You're sissified pansies, and if you were standing here right now, I'd look you in your punk face and I'd tell you it to your punk face. You understand? You use this mechanism to pester men, women, and children, and then you scurry off, having taken a signal to do so. You're a punk. All right, all the elderly people and senior citizens that you punks are harassing and putting in danger using this signaling mechanism, you're a punk and you're a sissy. Now go scurry off into the sunset on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get back to this document. I got a little off track. Sometimes these stalkers, these undercover operatives that draw a check from the state and these punk liaisons. I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the most scurrilous, scandalous weasels you have ever seen in your life. And the United States federal government is feeding them the resources, the manpower, the cash, and the capital that they need to continue on in their campaign of foolishness. And I want to address the operatives that are listening to me right now using remote bugging equipment. You can come right up in front of me right now where I'm sitting, and I'll call you exactly what I just called these stalkers. You hear me? Because when I do these lectures, ladies and gentlemen, I'm typically surrounded at some point by liaisons, undercovers, and stalkers who are looking to either listen into the lecture or disrupt it. I want y'all to come here, stand in front of me and listen. Don't listen from 100 yards away using sound boom equipment. Bring your butts over here. I'll tell you to your face what I think about you. And these signals you guys are throwing around. You understand? I got thousands of articles on social media talking about what you all do. I've got countless videos on social media talking about what you guys do. Everything I do is public and searchable by the global community. I'm telling the whole world what I think about you. It's not like I'm hiding it. Come here so I can tell you to your face what I think about you. I'd be happy to do it. Or maybe just scurry off, like all you stalkers do after you piss somebody off. Just scurry off. Scurry off in the name of the U.S. federal government that protects your garbage. So essentially what's happening is this intelligence researcher, John Marks, is basically saying that the CIA is participating in the same kinds of human experimentation that the Nazis experimented with. All right, now just think about that for a second. The U.S. federal establishment used to refer to the Nazis, the Imperial Japanese, and the corporate state Italians as the axis of evil. Okay, they're the Axis powers of evil. And then the United States turns right around after the war and uses the same kinds of experiments on its people that the Nazis used on its captives. Go figure. All right, so we are going to move on to the next article. And ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to forgive my rant there. I'm not saying to forgive it in terms of I'm taking anything I said back. I don't take anything I've ever said about gang stalkers, undercover operatives, or liaisons back. I don't take any of it back. I mean every word I've ever said on this program about undercover operatives, liaisons, and stalkers. All right, to me, they're scumbag weasels, ladies and gentlemen, and they do not care that the sum of their actions puts other U.S. citizens in danger. They don't care. They just like causing a fracas in the lives of other people, knowing they can get away with it, having been signaled to those people to cause that fracas by other stalkers. You see? There's strength in numbers to these animals, and they feel a lot better about what they do because they know that they're backed by other operatives, stalkers, and liaisons. They know they're a group. They know they're a standing army. They know they're a social order, these signalers. And they know that they can pretty much get away with anything, including crimes against children, just so long as they take signals to that child. Okay? They are scumbags. And I don't apologize for calling them that. But what I'm saying to my listeners is, you know, if I go off on a tangent like that, it's because I have seen something that day that one of these perpetrators have done to seriously agitate me. And from time to time, I might need to vent my frustrations live. So this is one of those days, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm typically a cool, calm, and collected person, but I'm still a person. And I do get agitated. And I'll tell you something, you go up against scumbags like these on a daily basis, you get pestered by scumbags like these on a daily basis. You have to watch your significant other, who is a female, get pestered by these scumbags on a daily basis. Yeah, it'll ruffle your feathers. Yeah, it'll make you angry. And yeah, you might need to vent when these busters show their ugly faces. So this next article is going to be from the New York Times. The date on it is Sunday, October 9th, 1977. The title of this article is "The Extent of University Work for the CIA is Hard to Pin Down." This article is written by Joe Thomas, who was a special to the New York Times. A special to the New York Times means that they may or may not be a regular employee of the New York Times or a staff writer, but it may mean that they are somebody that the newspaper hires, perhaps a freelance journalist or something like that, for articles of a specialized nature. So we're going to read through this article and do an analysis. Washington, this is from the article. This is from Washington, October 8th. Despite 3 days of congressional hearings, no one knows the degree to which some of the nation's most prominent universities were compromised in the Central Intelligence Agency's secret mind control research in the 1950s and 60s. Admiral Stansfield Turner, the director of Central Intelligence, said in a congressional testimony last August that the CIA covertly sponsored research at 80 institutions, including 44 colleges and universities, from 1953 to 1963. The research was part of the project codenamed MKUltra, which sought to control human behavior through such means as hypnosis, drugs, and brainwashing. The Senate Health Subcommittee wanted to hear the academicians' reaction, quietly invited the presidents of 20 institutions to testify at his hearings on September 20th and 21st. Only one president accepted. He was not scheduled to testify because all the others had declined, explaining they had previous engagements. The list of 80 institutions given to Senate investigators is still classified. But each of those institutions has been notified separately by the CIA that in some way, knowingly or unknowingly, it played host to CIA research, and 26 colleges and universities have acknowledged this publicly. Inquiries at these institutions disclosed that CIA research on campus varied from innocuous sociological surveys to tests aimed at finding better ways to administer drugs to unsuspecting subjects. The attitudes of current administrators likewise ran the gamut from outrage to indifference. The passage of time, more than 20 years in some cases, the CIA's secretiveness during the project, and the fragmentary nature of the records the CIA has made available to universities have combined in most cases to make a reconstruction of what happened difficult or impossible. At many universities, monies for these projects was channeled through foundations so that neither the university or the professor doing the research knew the true sponsor or purpose of the work. Sociological, cultural, and anthropological studies were financed through the Society of the Investigation of Human Ecology, based at Cornell University. Biochemical and medical research was oftentimes financed through the Geschichte Fund for Medical Research Incorporated, headed by Dr. Charles Geschichte, a Georgetown University pathologist. I feel that I've been done an injury personally by the CIA, said Dr. Anthony J. Weiner, who in 1957 received a $12,000 grant from the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. At that time, Dr. Weiner was a guest at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Center for International Studies with Herman Kahn. He later wrote that the year 2000. That part of the article is kind of blocked off, so I can't really see what he's saying about the year 2000. But I mean, this article was not written in the year 2000. It was written in 1977. So whatever he's saying about the year 2000, I can't see. I would have not lent myself to that kind of deception, and I don't think they should have practiced any sort of experimentation on me, Dr. Weiner said. So I'm going to have to paraphrase the rest of this article because it's kind of blocked off by a indentation in the page. So essentially what it's saying is that there are a number of people, including Dr. Weiner, who is saying that we didn't realize that these grants that we were receiving to do research were from the CIA, and we didn't know that the research we were doing was research that would lead to the degradation of human test subjects. Okay, so these university faculty members are basically saying, look, we now know that these research grants that we were being given by the CIA were for human experimentation purposes, but when we received the grants at the time, we had no idea it was for human experimentation purposes. So there were other staff members that felt assaulted by the CIA's covert projects. The director of government relations at Stanford University said that he feels like he's been made into a guinea pig by the CIA's deception. And that he feels slighted that the CIA was not up front, that these research projects that it was commissioning these university faculty members to do was actually human experimentation and so forth. They're saying they feel deceived by the CIA, and they didn't know that the research that they were doing from the donors of these grants, on behalf of the donors of these grants, was leading to human experimentation on actual people. They're saying they didn't realize that their work was to that end. And now they're blaming the CIA, and they're calling the CIA deceptive, and they're calling the CIA a big old barrel of donkey excrement. So you have Stanford University in particular that's going back and trying to find every research project that it did that was on behalf of the CIA's mind control ambitions. And mind you, ladies and gentlemen, there have been apparently 80 colleges that the CIA used for mind control research. And the colleges didn't even know that they were doing this research on behalf of the CIA. The CIA deceived them. The CIA sent grants to these colleges on behalf of institutions. Well, I'll say it like this. The CIA paid grants to these universities. Okay, some were 5-figure grants, some were 6-figure grants to these universities. And they were sending them, the CIA was sending these grants to these universities through companies that the CIA had control of. And these companies were essentially giving these grants to colleges in the form of donations for a specific cause and for specific kinds of research. But see, the universities that were accepting these grants from these companies that were controlled by the CIA didn't know that these companies that were donating this money were controlled by the CIA. Furthermore, these universities didn't realize that the CIA was essentially in the background using these colleges for mind control experiments, that their research was being used for that end. These colleges and universities didn't know that, and they were disgusted. And that's part of the reason why when the Senate Intelligence Committee summoned the presidents of these colleges to do an investigation, only one of the presidents responded. All of the other presidents said, "No, we don't want nothing to do with this. We're presently doing our own investigation." So, I mean, it just goes to show, I mean, the CIA, it needs to stop deceiving people. It needed to stop deceiving people back then, and it needs to stop deceiving people now. Quit lying to the American people, CIA. Quit lying to the American people, DOJ. Quit lying to the American people, Department of War. Quit lying to the American people, Supreme Court. Quit telling us that this gang stalking thing doesn't exist. There is a synchronized attack mechanism in this country that involves at least 50 million U.S. citizens as attackers against various persons known as targeted individuals. Don't try and play it off as if it doesn't exist so you can continue perpetrating it with impunity. Ultimately, what you have is what you have is a brand of sissified thuggery that is cowardly in nature and involves people who are inclined to conduct themselves like scumbags on a daily basis, particularly in groups. And these scumbags, basically, they do dirt and then they scurry off into the sunset. Having taken a signal from some other scumbag who has asked them to do their dirt so they can all have a good time and enjoy the show that their deleterious actions cause. So, if the CIA will fool a university, it'll fool anybody. All right, so we have another document we're going to read here. This is documents disclose CIA research, and that background noise is hecklers, ladies and gentlemen, that you hear. I got hecklers where I'm at. These are gang stalkers. They're undercover operatives who may or may not be paid by the state. And they are, who else? They're liaisons. And I got members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints around too, spying and probably using signaling mechanisms to make this lecture as difficult as it can possibly be. Hello, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, your members, the ones that are around, the ones that are listening, the ones that are broadcasting. I'd like to send you a greeting right now in the name of the Savior, Jesus Christ, who you apparently get on your hands and knees and bow to and worship every night. Hi, I'm glad you're here spying on the lecture. I see the results of your actions. I know you're using signals to these hecklers. I don't know if you're Cuban members of the church. I don't know if you're Caucasian members of the church. I don't know if you're black members of the church, because you're all very well hidden right now. But I see the results of your actions, and I know you're present right now listening to me. If I was this interesting to you guys, you should have came to some of my Sunday talks and testimonies when I was a member of the church 9 years ago. You'd have gotten a good blessing then. But 9 years after my last church service, I don't know why you hecklers are around. Okay, and to persons from Shaker Heights High School who are around, it's been 25 years since I've seen or talked to any of you. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself for being this involved with somebody that has no interest in your presence whatsoever. So, and to the Cuban Americans that are here, you apparently get a real kick out of this. That's okay. I got a new episode of Cuba Terrorism and the Gang Stalking Connection coming up. You can learn more about Cuban history, its role in the international cocaine smuggling trade, its history and present in narco-terrorism, and its designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. You will get a nice lecture coming up, ladies and gentlemen, on Cuba terrorism and the gang stalking connection in the future. Mormon Church, you guys have a nice lecture coming as well. Shaker Heights High School, that crowd, you know what? I might do a third video on you guys. I haven't decided. I got better things to do with my time. But I see the results of your actions. You're pestering and disrupting as usual. So go scurry off into the sunset somewhere, y'all. This next document, ladies and gentlemen, is from the Columbia Daily Spectator from Columbia University in New York. It's dated April 17th, 1980. The title of this document is Documents Disclose CIA Research. Agency financed covert studies in the 1950s and 60s. And just give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to light up a cigarette as I talk. That tends to happen if I get agitated. 1 second, please. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so this document is authored by Jim Schachter. Agents of the Central Intelligence Agency directed research projects at Columbia during the 1950s and 60s. Studies previously undisclosed were both covertly and openly funded by the CIA as recently as 1969. Supposedly by independent organizations, including the National Science Foundation, were used as fronts for CIA financing of research. CIA employees have taken courses at Columbia and may still. These revelations and others which call into question the integrity of current as well as former Columbia faculty members. Administrators shed new light on the CIA's operations during its formative years. They are culled from thousands of CIA and Columbia documents related released rather to Spectator to Spectator, I guess that's a newspaper, under terms of the Federal Freedom of Information Act. The documents, accounting records, correspondence, research contact tracks, and internal CIA memoranda were obtained as part of an ongoing 2.5-year legal action. They tell of an intelligence agency seeking to exploit the expertise of a leading university, willing to shoulder its patriotic duty as it sought funding for its teachers' and students' research, and of a time before the initial CIA automatically cast doubt on the propriety of an academic enterprise. All CIA-sponsored activities at Columbia, the documents suggest, were apparently harmless. If the files tell the complete story of the university's relationship with the agency, then no Columbia professors engaged in the mind-controlled drug testing experiments that raised furs on other campuses when they were disclosed in 1977. None of the Columbia studies, it appears, used or produced classified materials. But frequently the researchers, both scientists, both students and teachers, were unaware of the sources of the study's funding, and when the researchers knew of CIA support, it seems they often kept university administrators and faculty colleagues unaware of their relationships with the agency. So I'll stop there. This is a very wordy article. Lots of data, lots to unpack here. So it's talking about Columbia University specifically. It reiterates a lot of the points that I just made about the CIA clandestinely funding human behavior research projects at universities and not disclosing that the CIA is behind it, and also not disclosing that the research was for human mind control and human behavior experimentation. The CIA kept these matters very private for fear of backlash and outrage, because most people in their right mind see human experimentation as deplorable, because it oftentimes causes damage to the person being experimented on. So this entire article really is a reiteration of things that I have covered already about colleges and universities, including the use of the Office of Naval Research as a funding conduit. The CIA paid colleges for research using the Office of Naval Research as a proxy, so as to hide the true nature of the research as being for mind control experiments. And I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this article, ladies and gentlemen, because I've already covered quite a bit of it in my earlier article. So we're going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to keep scrolling. I'm going to scroll down to the part Okay, let's look at the we'll look at the final 3 bullet points. Okay, because in theory, I've already covered much of this article in previous lectures. So we're going to focus on the last 3 bullet points. Now, I would like to address before we get into these final three bullet points, just to address the hecklers. And mind you, the only people that would know that I was going to be at this exact spot at this exact time doing this exact lecture are undercover operatives, liaisons, and stalkers, because they relay information to each other back and forth as to where I'm headed, the direction I'm traveling, my mode of transportation, where I'm likely going to stop, and what I'm likely going to do when I stop. And this live pestering scheme that these stalkers like to perpetrate on the American people with impunity commenced the minute I got here. I'm at Bell Harbor, Bayside Park. And the hecklers were apparently waiting on me. So what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is, I've scanned through this document, and much of this document I've already covered in previous lectures. And I don't see much of a reason to reiterate these many paragraphs. So we're going to focus on the final three bullet points and then move to the next article. It says Columbia's War Documentation Project, headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia, and in the early 1950s was of common concern to the State Department, the USIA, and the CIA, and was funded by the CIA in 1954. The previous sponsor was the Air Force. The project involved research studies based on captured German and Russian documents, dealing especially with Soviet psychological warfare and counter-psychological warfare. The project was administered by Columbia's Bureau of Applied Social Research, headed by BASR Director Charles Glock, and classified as confidential. So essentially what this bullet point is saying is that the CIA, in cooperation with the United States Information Agency, which is in scope and in function very similar to the CIA, that it collects intelligence, it collects domestic and foreign intelligence on various matters, and the project involved captured documents that the U.S. Armed Services captured during World War II, particularly from Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, concerning some of the psychological warfare tactics that Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia used on their enemies during the war. And these documents were used in part as a blueprint for some of the mind control experiments that the CIA was using on its own citizens right here in the United States. So a lot of the MK Ultra, MK Search, MK Naomi, and all of the sub-projects of MK Ultra aimed to do was mimic Nazi German and Soviet Russian psychological warfare tactics against its own citizens as test subjects to see if these psychological warfare tactics actually work. And that's some of what's happening right now, ladies and gentlemen, with clandestine gang stalking. A lot of what a TI goes through is psychological warfare. And this psychological warfare is reminiscent of the kinds of psychological warfare that the Nazis used on captive persons in concentration camps, and some of the psychological warfare tactics that the Soviets used against their political enemies. Now, here's the thing. Here's the difference between what the Nazis did, what the Soviets did, and what the U.S. is doing right now. So, the Nazis used human experimentation protocols on its concentration camp victims, and it also used these same human experimentation protocols on on its political enemies. Okay? The Soviets used these experimentation protocols on their political enemies and on their gulag prisoners, but they also used them on their military enemies, including prisoners of war. The United States is using these protocols on their own damn citizens. That's the difference. They're not using these warfare tactics, these human experimentation tactics, these human mind control tactics on political enemies. The U.S. is using them on sovereign United States citizens in their own country. That's the difference. You understand? My goal here is not to condone or belittle human experimentation or psychological warfare tactics against your adversaries, your political enemies, or hazardous criminals that you have kept in prisons. My objection is for a country to that uses these same protocols, experimentations, and attacks against their own citizens out in the open. Maybe go pick on somebody your own size. United States. Maybe go find an adversary to try this stuff on. What, are you afraid? Why do you need to pick on U.S. citizens and their significant others with this garbage? These state-sanctioned attack mechanisms that you level against U.S. citizens on a daily basis, regardless of age or gender. Maybe go pick on somebody your own damn size, DOD, DOJ. Go find somebody that needs this crap. Stop using these open-air domestic terrorism mechanisms against U.S. citizens that are attempting to achieve life, liberty, and happiness, which is what is guaranteed to them by the founding documents of this country. Huh? That's okay. History will judge. If the federal establishment of this country, they can't get their crap together to the point where it finds a better way to gather data on human experimentation aside from gang stalking campaigns, history will judge. And I invoke my First Amendment rights, ladies and gentlemen, under the U.S. Constitution to say what I'm saying. I stand by everything I've publicly uttered, and I backtrack on nothing I've ever said about clandestine gang stalking or derivative programs like MK Ultra. So the second bullet point, CIA employees have attended classes mostly at the graduate level at the university. A roster of the employees and the studies they undertook in CIA files but was denied to Spectator. Lee Strickland, a CIA Assistant General Counsel, explained in a letter that federal law prohibits the agency from revealing such information. The CIA would not say what years the roster covers. So what we see in this second bullet point is we see where CIA operatives were taking classes at universities. And they took specific classes, but what the names of the operatives were and what classes they took has been hidden. And we don't know what those CIA operatives were doing in college classrooms taking classes. And I can attest, ladies and gentlemen, there is a ton of gang stalking that happens on college campuses, okay? It's a rigged game, okay? You got all these kids, sometimes in the hundreds or thousands, signaling each other to the locations of targeted students and pestering them inside and outside of the classroom, and it makes it very difficult to keep your focus and your and the integrity of your work in high standards, because of the difficulties. And I would just like to say now, when I was attending colleges and universities from the 2011 to the 2017 range, ladies and gentlemen, I encountered a lot of synchronization inside and outside college campuses, and it can be very overwhelming for a targeted individual. It can be very overwhelming. College is already a daunting task in and of itself. Even more daunting is this task when you are constantly ducking and dodging hordes of stalkers who are essentially making their college experience more adventurous by flinging and catching signals from other on-campus stalkers to the whereabouts and the locations of targeted persons. And yeah, there are college students across the country that use this signaling mechanism to find drunk female college students to rape. Okay? If you are a male college student in the United States and you want to find a passed out female college student somewhere, you can actually follow signals to a passed out female college student, walk right up to her and rape her, and when she wakes up, she'll have no knowledge or recollection of what you've done. Okay? Yeah, stalkers use signals to commit crimes. It's not just about finding people to pester with no recourse. Gang stalkers, undercover operatives, and liaisons use these mechanisms to rape people. They use them to kill people. They use them to burglarize homes, and they use them to abuse children with no recourse. Okay, yes, a person that would take a signal to the location of another human being in order to perpetrate a crime against that person is the kind of person that would make a good stalker, liaison, or undercover operative. Okay? That's why people become liaisons, undercover operatives, and gang stalkers, is because they have a clandestine, fortified, shared signaling mechanism that allows them to perpetrate acts of thuggery against their fellow U.S. citizens with no consequence. And they're backed by other stalkers, they're backed by other operatives, they're backed by other liaisons. That's why they do what they do. It's because they know that what they do is covert, they know it's hidden, they know it's signal-based, they know it's difficult to detect, and they know that they have other like-minded scumbags supporting them. Okay? A lot of college campus rapes that you hear about are perpetrated by liaisons, undercover operatives, and gang stalkers who took signals to the location of passed out women on college campuses. You understand? It's a way for scumbags, weasels, and derelicts to get away with crimes. You understand? The signaling mechanism is state sanctioned, so that means it's effective, it's efficient, and it's tested. If you want to be the kind of person who gets to commit crimes against people without recourse and without getting police attention, follow the signals that liaisons, undercover operatives, and stalkers use with each other. They know how to signal each other in ways that are undetectable to police, and they also signal each other in ways that allow them to commit crimes in the absence of law enforcement officers. Okay, you can get a signal in a place and at a time where there are no officers present. Okay, if I want to send you, if I'm a stalker or undercover operative or a liaison, let's say, and I want to help you stage a robbery of a store or something, I can send you signals as to when to make your move, particularly at a time where there are very few law enforcers in the area, which greatly reduces your chance of getting caught. If I'm a college student at an American university and I want to help you rape a female student without her ever getting wise, I could easily find a way to systematically signal you to the location of a passed out female on that campus that you could easily take advantage of with no recourse. If you are a pedophile that uses this stalking mechanism and you are an undercover operative, a liaison, or a stalker, and you want to get some sort of a signal to the location of a child that you could easily take advantage of, yeah, those stalkers do that crap too. And they know how to allow themselves to do it in such a way so as to reduce the chance of them getting caught. Gang stalking is all about being able to commit crimes against your fellow man without recourse, using signaling mechanisms. And be careful of those Christians out there, ladies and gentlemen, that claim to be of God, that use this garbage. Okay, there's a lot of Christians in this country that claim to be born again, Savior-loving Christians that use gang stalking's espionage, treason, disruption, harassment, attack, and disease-spreading mechanisms to accomplish their personal goals of vengeance and hatred against their fellow man. Even people, ladies and gentlemen, that they haven't seen in years. And let's not forget the CIA's experiment on little boys. In 1961, the CIA did an experiment on little boys, 5 to 7 years of age. They went through a research clinic and offered free circumcisions on little boys aged 5 to 7 with the expectation that they'd be able to monitor those boys' behaviors over the next few years to see if those circumcisions turned them into homosexuals. And that's what the CIA's been up to with your tax dollars, ladies and gentlemen, performing experiments on little boys' genitals. All right, so here's the next bullet point and the last bullet point. And like I say, ladies and gentlemen, I have kind of skipped over much of this document as I have already covered these points in previous lectures. These 3 bullet points are 3 fresh talking points that I have not yet covered. So here is the last bullet point, then we'll move to the next article. At one point, Colombia invited CIA employees to enter a special program in the Russian Institute. In 1951, Institute Director Geroid Robinson wrote to General George Bedell Smith, director of the CIA, suggesting that 50 CIA armed forces and foreign service officers enroll in a 1-year comprehensive training program. One second, ladies and gentlemen. All right, in the Russian area. A response from the CIA indicated an interest in the proposal, but no additional correspondence on the subject seems to exist. Strickland speculated it seems quite possible that some CIA employees attended the program in 1951 to 1952 or thereafter. But he said such records would only be filed under employees' names and are thus simply not recoverable. At one point, so Columbia University invited CIA employees to enter a program at the Russian Institute, which in which CIA operatives and armed forces personnel and foreign services officers were to take a 1-year comprehensive training program on Russian military operations, obviously. It said that the CIA appeared interested in the proposal, but no further documents exist on whether or not the CIA actually participated in this training module. You think it would, because first of all, one of the very reasons that the MK Ultra project even came into being was because the CIA wanted access to psychological warfare tactics and physiological warfare tactics and biochemical warfare tactics that it thought the Soviet Russians were using. It wanted to use these same tactics, protocols, and substances on the American people to see if they worked. And could be used against a foreign adversary in a time of war. However, it's unknown as to whether or not the CIA actually involved itself in this project and in this protocol. And as I speak, I'd like to address these hecklers that I got again. A lot of these people are around me, having followed me from other parts of the county, not because they're fans of mine and not because they are interested in what I do, but because they want to make sure that I'm not on the phone with some law enforcement agency talking about them. Okay, that's what they think. They think that I'm going from town to town on buses, going to remote locations, hopping on my phone and calling the police on people. That's what they think. And they're afraid of that because a lot of these jokers that I got following me around are not only stalkers, they're not only undercover operatives, they're not only liaisons, but they're criminals. And they're involved in criminal activity. And they're afraid that what I'm really doing is getting on the phone with local, state, or federal law enforcers and filing complaints against their narco-terrorism or whatever it is they're trying to get me into. All right? And I wouldn't doubt if there are members of the Latter-day Saint Church that are involved in this too, because, one of the things that I talk about is how children are abused in this narco-terrorist exercise called gang stalking. And there are a lot of pedophiles in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that are around kids constantly. And I think a lot of the pedophiles in that church use signaling mechanisms to find access to children. All right, there are also a lot of pedophiles in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Why? It's because it's hot here a lot of the times, and there are a lot of scantily clad children around lots throughout the day. And a lot of pedophiles come down here with hidden cameras all over them, taking pictures of kids all day. There are undercover operatives that are pedophiles that come to Miami-Dade County that take pictures of kids. With their hidden camera equipment too. Liaisons and stalkers are very nasty individuals. And that's why they cling together so tightly. And that's why they go after targeted individuals with such force, is because they know that their criminal activity alongside the signaling activity is going to be exposed at some point. And that's something that they desperately do not want to happen. Because see, a lot of undercover operatives, liaisons, and stalkers, a lot of them are family people. They have husbands, they have wives, they have kids, they have careers. And they don't want all that destroyed by the revelation that they are not only espionage agents, that they're not only state-sanctioned pesterers, but they're also pedophiles, bigots, and state-sanctioned harassers. That could destroy their marriage. That could destroy their life. That could destroy their career if that type of stuff came to light. So a lot of these stalkers, undercovers, liaisons, and operatives, the ones that I go after, the ones that I confront on a daily basis, you're not only annoying, you're not only harmful, you're not only disruptive, you're not only disgusting, but you're problematic as well. So we're going to move over into the next document. This document is from the Lantern newspaper in Columbus, Ohio. This is dated Friday, April 14th, 1978. And the title is CIA's Turner Defends Agency's Campus Actions. The author of this document is Michael T. Capsa. It says the director of the CIA, Stansfield Turner, spoke at Ohio State University Thursday in defense of his agency's use of academic scholars and said that he was there to keep those relations going strong. Relationships between the CIA and faculty members should be no different than any other relationship a professor may enter into. Turner said during an afternoon conference with members of the media at Mershon Center located at 199 West 10th Avenue. Turner, a Navy career officer, was at Ohio State as a part of a continuing tour of college campuses. He has spoken on numerous campuses around the country for the past year, throwing little new light on the MKUltra project. Turner reaffirmed that Ohio State was not one of the campuses where actual drug testing had been done. According to Turner, the problem on this campus was that university officials did not know that faculty members were involved in the project in the 1950s and 60s. University administrators learned of MKUltra in September 1977 when the CIA released heavily edited documents that showed OSU was involved along with 79 other institutions. The project sponsored by the CIA involved chemical experimentation on humans. It is believed to have been done with mind-altering drugs. Defending the secrecy that surrounds past CIA activity, Turner said when you make confidential relationships, you cannot disclose everything. However, he said that the agency has been trying to be more open and help people understand what it does. There is no way we can give the public total scrutiny, he said. He added that this was one of the reasons oversight committees were recently established to keep tabs on U.S. intelligence agencies. Turner criticized former CIA agents who have written books concerning their careers with the agency. Many of these agents did not consult with the CIA before publishing their books and subsequently confidential materials believed to have endangered existing intelligence operations having been released. The oversight committees were also formed to handle these complaints, Turner said, but he added, I have yet to file one whistleblower who has gone through the oversight procedures. So essentially, okay, so this is Admiral Stansfield Turner. Okay, so this is Admiral Stansfield Turner, who's the director of the CIA, and Admiral Stansfield Turner stands out in my mind as the CIA director who this entire program fell down on his shoulders. Okay, previous CIA directors from 1953 to about 1973, they all participated in and authorized MKUltra with impunity, okay, and simply sat back and just enjoyed their time as director of the CIA at the expense of the taxpayer. Admiral Stansfield Turner was the CIA director that all this crap that previous CIA directors authorized, all of it fell down on his shoulders. And he was the one that had to answer to Senate committees. He was the one that had to talk to newspapers. He's the one that had to talk to radio hosts and news journalists and television hosts, and he's the one that had to explain himself in letters and documents to colleges and universities. I mean, this guy, the entire MKUltra project just fell. It collapsed on this man's shoulders as the CIA director, and his tenure as CIA director was marked with having to explain and defend the actions of the CIA during his predecessor's terms in office. And this is another instance of that. Ohio State, its college wants to know what was the CIA doing recruiting colleges and universities to do mind control experiments on people. And General Stansfield Turner is basically saying two things. He's saying, well, for one, yes, some colleges were recruited by the CIA to perform mind control experiments on people, but Ohio State University was not one of those colleges. Also, he's saying that he's not going to tell these questioners and these interrogators everything, because part of the nature of the CIA's work is to maintain some level of secrecy. So he's doing the best he can. He's doing all that he can. He can't tell everything. Me personally, I imagine when this gang stalking product is brought to light, when the documents concerning gang stalking are brought to light, people like myself and my significant other, Lori, who have had to tolerate this garbage in excess of 10 years, are going to be looking intently for evidence of criminal malfeasance and the explanations of our U.S. government and the state governments as to why this program was kept secret for so long. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what he's saying is that there's always going to be some level of secrecy, which I think is garbage. And the reason I think it's garbage is because 8,000 documents concerning Project MKUltra were located in an accounting room in the CIA. 8,000 pages of documents related to MKUltra were found in a CIA accounting room. And that's documented fact. That's documented history. And a lot of those documents are publicly searchable on FBI websites and on CIA websites. All right, we're going to go to the next document. All right, this is a document that I covered in a previous lecture, but I re-examined it and I want to talk about it again for emphasis. This document is the Washington Post. It's dated September 2nd, 1977. It says here in the title, CIA conducted mind control tests up to 1972, new data shows. The authors are Bill Richards and John Jacobs. And like I said, I have covered this previously, but I would like to cover it again for emphasis. The CIA intelligence agency has uncovered thousands of lost documents that show that its chemical and biological mind control experiments on human subjects were conducted as late as mid-1972. CIA Director Stansfield Turner has maintained that the only sketchy financial records left in the CIA's files on its mind control project showed that human experimentation was discontinued in 1964. The newly discovered files, 14 files with about 700 pages of financial records, indicate that human subjects were experimented on with their knowledge under the CIA's Project MK search until the project was halted by CIA Technical Services Division Director Sidney Godaleb on July 10, 1972. A CIA spokesman acknowledged yesterday that the MK search files had been located among budget material. The spokesman also said that 14 boxes of additional detailed intelligence files were stumbled upon several weeks ago by the CIA researchers during a routine view of inactive records. The boxes contain records of U.S. intelligence operations going back to the days of the Office of the Strategic Services in 1943. The CIA spokesman said that the OSS was the CIA's predecessor in these in these operations. They also contain detailed operation files on chemical and biological experimentation run from 1949 until the mid-1950s under the CIA's code names Bluebird and Artichoke. Sub-projects of the experiments included CIA personnel who were aware of the experiments and foreigners who may have not been, according to the CIA. The CIA spokesman said he was not aware of if the Bluebird Artichoke documents, which are still classified, showed any experimentation on prisoners of war captured in Korea. North Korean officials accused the U.S. in 1951 of conducting bacteriological experimentation on captured POWs at Kojay Island prison off of South Korea. U.S. officials emphatically denied the charges. The MK search files were described by the CIA as skimpy. The project was the CIA's successor to an earlier mind control operation codenamed MK Ultra, which began in the 1950s and tapered off in the mid-1960s. In MK Search, volunteers, some of which were paid, were apparently involved in chemical and biological experiments. The experimentation was farmed out to various private researchers who were under instructions to explain the subjects that they were receiving the CIA spokesman. The spokesman called MK Search a sanitized version of earlier MK Ultra operations. Turner publicly deplored the human experimentation aspects of MK Ultra last month. Full records on the CIA mind control programs were destroyed by Godaleb just before he retired in 1973. According to secret testimony by Godaleb to the Senate Intelligence Committee last year, during that testimony, Godaleb insisted that he had forgotten most of the details and programs. According to the CIA spokesman, the newly discovered files were overlooked during previous searches, described by Turners and others in the CIA as thorough because of the agency's poor filing system. The CIA was screwed up. We didn't find the old files because all early records were compartmentalized, and we looked in the wrong compartment. He said that it was possible that additional records on the agency's drug and mind control experiments may still be discovered. In a related development, Johns Hopkins University said yesterday that it was among 86 private institutions involved in MK Ultra that named chemistry professor and an unnamed chemistry professor was paid from 1964 to 66 by the CIA to develop allergens for the agency under a project titled Harassment by the intelligence agency. And I think that is a very sophisticated and very elegant place to stop, ladies and gentlemen. The CIA was using Johns Hopkins University researcher to develop allergens for harassment purposes. I'm going to say that one more time for effect. The CIA used, through a research facility, the academic resources of Johns Hopkins University to do research on allergens for harassment purposes. I'm going to say that once more, ladies and gentlemen, because this has got to sink in. The Central Intelligence Agency of the United States went through a bought and paid for research lab to gain access to research facilities available at Johns Hopkins University to do research and carry out research on allergens that were to be used by the CIA for harassment purposes. Okay? One of the more, I guess you could call it the lesser known aspects of MK Ultra was that a lot of the biological agents, chemical agents, and substances that the CIA used in their research program was to find out how well it could be used to harass people. The CIA sought to use chemicals, drugs, substances and toxins as harassment tools against U.S. citizens. Why? Those things are very well guarded by the CIA, but I am going to do some research myself tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And my next MK Ultra presentation will focus on the CIA's research on chemicals and biological agents for harassment purposes against people. Like I've always said, gang stalking is an atrocity and it's a crime against humanity, and so was MK Ultra. What you have is a big government, one of the biggest governments in the world, one of the most well-resourced governments in the world, using its vast resources, its vast cash reserves, and its vast influence to perpetrate experiments on its citizens without their knowledge and despite the damage it would cause to U.S. citizens. That's why there was so much heat coming down on Admiral Stansfield Turner by the Senate and by the American news media. This sounded like something out of a Dr. Frankenstein novel, the stuff that the CIA was doing to people. Essentially what Stansfield Turner is saying is that there are financial records that were left. There were experimentation records that were left. There are well-documented events and very in-depth files of a expository nature on MK Ultra that were found. 700, 800 boxes of materials, 700 pages of financial records. The North Koreans wanted to know if the U.S. experimented on North Korean prisoners of war. Okay, the U.S. has denied these allegations. The U.S. has denied these accusations. But at some point, there was some evidence that, and I got more hecklers approaching, so you'll have to bear with my pacing as I read and as I talk. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, these discourses, these lectures are more difficult to render when you have stalkers approaching you as you deliver the lecture. But I still prefer to do these lectures outdoors because I want these stalkers to hear what I'm saying. Okay, if I do my lectures indoors, you know, they probably got bugging equipment at my residence, etc., but I want to see the looks on these stalkers' faces when I confront them as they walk around me. So that's part of the reason I do it outside. It's not the full reason. It's about 20% of the reason. The other 80% of the reason is I just simply like being outside. I'm an outdoors person. And I'm able to observe the movements and the disposition of the people that come around me as I deliver these lectures. And I document these things for my own research purposes as I further investigate clandestine gang stalking. This is interesting. I mean, the North Koreans believe that during the Korean War, the United States, who was on the side of South Korea in that war, may have captured North Korean soldiers and performed experiments on them. North Korea is suspicious of the United States in this regard. I'm suspicious of the United States in this regard as well. I believe the United States performed experiments on North Korean prisoners of war as a part of its MK Ultra program. The United States denied these accusations. I don't believe the denials. And I think that North Korea has every right to be suspicious of the United States in this regard. Admiral Stansfield Turner is essentially saying this. Look, we didn't have the oversight on this program that we should have had. We should have been more thorough with our protocols and procedures with respect to MK Ultra and its capacity to cause harm or damage to United States citizens. We should have had more of a interactivity between departments in the CIA so that there was more interconnectiveness on this program. He's saying we should have had more oversight, but we should have sought more oversight by the Senate Intelligence Committee. And pretty much there just should have been more cohesion and cooperation throughout the entire CIA on MK Ultra, rather than just letting one or two departments of the CIA, okay, 3 at the most, oversee the entire program for its 20-year run. You see, so Admiral Stansfield Turner is just basically saying, listen, I know what this looks like, I know what it sounds like. I didn't have full knowledge of what was happening in MK Ultra. There was very little oversight. There wasn't enough hands-on management from executive leadership positions in the Senate and in the CIA on this matter. And I think that the human experimentation aspect of Project MK Ultra is disgusting. And he's also saying that the totality of the matter is that despite how disgusting or deplorable Admiral Stansfield Turner sees this program as, he wasn't able to do anything about it while it was running because he wasn't aware of everything that was occurring. So, I mean, that just goes to show that when a person wants to do dirt bad enough, they'll find a way to skirt the procedures. They'll find a way to get around the authority figures, and they'll find a way to implement thuggery at a very vast level. Excuse me, just took a sip of water. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It will also enable people who have access to state resources to perpetrate clandestine acts of thuggery against the U.S. populace in such a way that will cause a certain irrevocable damage in society. And you see, it took 60 years for the effects of MK Ultra to be fully implemented in American society, and now you got gang stalking, which is a program that was implemented probably in the 90s. Around 1995, gang stalking started becoming more of a thing, and then by 2013, it was gaining steam, and then by 2016, it was full blown. So, I'm a crusader against gang stalking. I think it's a crime against humanity. I think it's atrocious. I think it's disgusting. I think its actors are soulless zombies and useful idiots. And my goal right now is to protect myself and my significant others from the menace that gang stalking poses. Thank you for tuning in.